So I have a follow-up question to question number 3. Okay, hypothetically, you meet a person and discover that that person has 2 months to live. How would you guide that person with that internal conflict based on your stance?
For me, that's really difficult because I don't know how they would be handling and coping with it. But for me, I would probably go along the lines of learning to help them accept it. Like let them know their options, help them maybe meet their bucket list, as we like to call it. Maybe some of their last wishes of what they want to do. Help them make sure they get their happiness fulfilled, like their dreams and goals fulfilled. Other than that, I'm not sure. Offer to be there for them, but I really don't know how it would help them until that happens to me.
I think that's good, Spencer, to be aware, where are they coming from? You don't know when to go. So I think I would start definitely by kind of getting a picture of what is going to happen when you die. So many people have never thought about that before, which is crazy, So helping them, sometimes I see myself as like a worldview coach, where you kind of coach people through, have you thought about what your worldview does for you? That's kind of something that we probably all do. And I would be faithful to tell them, where are you at with Jesus? Because I think that's what is important, So I would ask them, where do you stand with Jesus? Do you know his offer to you? Do you know how awesome it is that he's inviting you into God's family? So, yeah. And it's kind of a miserable thing, but there's so much hope for when your worldview is all wrapped up in the Bible. There's all this hope after you die, because it's just going to get better, actually. It sucks that you're not going to be with your family, but there's this awesome thing oh my gosh, I'm actually truly coming fully alive. So that's encouraging to me as well. Sorry.
It's a very difficult situation to be in. It depends on someone you know, someone you don't know. It's very difficult to coach someone about their faith in their last 2 months when you don't know them. Who the heck are you? But I think coming to terms with their death, and I think rather than a bucket list, although a bucket list is an encouraging thing, but I think more is closing the book. Meaning, these issues, he had a bad relationship with his brother, she had issues with her mom. These things, closing these books is a very important, I think, has a cauterization effect on the person. Just cleanse these wounds in the soul before facing God. One is going back to God. And these are very important. We believe it's actually a mercy from God when God gives you an indication that you're about to go. It's actually, as opposed to living your life, in a horrible way and then just dying of fire, boom. And that we feel that that's giving you a chance to think before you face God about how things have been is generally a gift, because it gives you that time to close these books, deal with it, sort out your ideas. Maybe you end up deciding that there is no God, and maybe you end up deciding that you want to prepare for meeting Him. So I would try and help them in that discovery, but if they would allow me, I think it's a very difficult still to do.
Heidi?
I think one of the first things I would be asking is where that person is and what supports them. What is do they have a belief system that encourages them, that brings them comfort, that helps them with any distressing thing or tragic thing in their life? Is there something they've used that they're calling on now? And how might they use that? And I'd probably have more questions than statements. How could you use that? I think the opportunity, maybe the one thing I would make statements about, is that opportunity to heal relationships, to complete self, have a sense of completion for them, which I think is a human need. I don't think it's a religious need. I think humans need to feel that they can look at their life and say, I feel complete, and that my relationships were good. And I've seen in people that are dying some amazing things happen with siblings that they didn't get along with, or parents that they were at odds with, that all of a sudden come together. And interesting, in that last little bit, they leave at least their immediate world better than it was. They create amazing change, and encouraging the power of that in this disability time, in this time of fear, in this time of coming to grips with what's coming, there's a great powerfulness in that to impact people, to impact the world, to impact themselves.
Thank you. Got a little messy there. Whew. All right, so next question is, what are some of the myths, stereotypes, and misunderstandings about your belief system?
I believe there's a lot when it comes to all religions and non-religions, but for what I see specifically, I see a lot is that we don't have morals, atheists, that we're immoral, that how could we possibly be good since we don't even believe in the ultimate good of a God? And to that I just say, look around and see what we do. We do charitable aid. We try to help those around us. We're good people. Yeah, there's bad atheists, there's bad Christians, there's bad Muslims, there's bad Jews. I mean, your religion or belief doesn't dictate your actions. That might only help justify your actions. But that's one of the main stereotypes that I've always had a problem with, that I can't be immoral or a good person, or or that, oh, your life has no meaning anymore. That's another one too. Like, no, my life has plenty of meaning. I find my meaning in love, like in loving others and helping others. That's where I find my meaning in bettering my world and the people in it. And those are stereotypes that I hate to see, that I don't have morals or that my life has no meaning because I don't believe in a God.
Thank you. Jeff?
Okay, I'm going to use my timer for this one because I don't want to run away with it.
Oh, I have you.
Okay.
Right here.
Okay, here's one big misconception that I think people come to Christianity with Jesus is, and I've heard us saying it up here even already, is there's a super popular philosophy right now that, even like with the coexist bumper sticker, you guys saw that on the flyer, like, let's all get along. It doesn't matter which religion you choose, as long as it makes you a good person and you don't, as long as you don't hurt other people, try to force them into your belief. Like, that is a super appealing philosophy to us because it sounds friendly, right? Like, we're trying to get along, we're trying to live together. But when you get down deeper in the surface there, what's happening is you're lumping all the teachers, Muhammad, Jesus, Gautama Siddhartha, the Dalai Lama, you're putting those guys together and you're saying they all say the same thing, which just isn't the case at all, actually. So a misconception that people come to with Christianity is that you can kind of plump Jesus right down in with everybody else. And if I'm going to speak on God's behalf from a biblical perspective, that's not how it works. His teaching doesn't say the same thing as everybody else. And here's the crazy part, okay? It would be nice, like if we can say, oh, let's just all get along, because we're all kind of going in the same direction. But Jesus says some crazy stuff in the Bible. He says, I'm the only way to get to God. He says, you can't get to God through me. And he makes it like really, you can't get to God, sorry, thanks for making a weird face, Kathleen. You can't get to God through, without me. And so he makes it really clear, like, there's no lumping me with everybody else. I'm the only way. I'm the truth, the way, the life. Okay, so, and that's just important because it's kind of like an abuse of his teaching to try to say, oh, he just fits in with everyone else. So I think that's important. But obviously, like, when you look at Jesus' teaching, he wants unity. He's the master of community. So that's one thing. 40 seconds. Another one is we do this crazy thing with God where we say, oh, something bad happened. Where were you, God? Okay, that's a weird question to ask because it comes from this assumption that we deserve good things in our life and we shouldn't get bad, think about this. We live in a world that is separated from God because we were like, screw you, God. And so the default is bad, okay? That in the biblical perspective, I think, I could be wrong, but I think the default is bad. When anything good happens, love, happiness, goodness, health,
Okay.
that's a bonus from God. So, that's what I think.
Appreciate it. Art?
Where do I begin? I guess I'll begin with a study was done in 2006, 2007 about asking Americans about 5 stereotypes about Muslims that they believe, whether they believe them or not. And the 5 stereotypes were Muslims teach their kids to hate others, Muslims want to kill non-believers, Muslims oppress their women, the typical stuff. And 67% of the people who were asked believed in at least one of the 5. So that means 2 out of 3 people walking down the street looking at me believe that I am one of these things. Right? I think 40% believed in 2, 20% believed in 3. So it was very shocking. So there's a lot of stereotypings of Islam and Muslims specifically in the United States and in the West. Where it comes from is a lot of heritage from conflicts between Western civilizations and the Middle East, and specifically the Crusades and the colonization period, where there was a lot of literature written that is very derogatory toward Muslims in general, of how they think, what they think. We used to be called Mohammedans. How many of you knew that? So we were called Mohammedans for a long time. It took them a while to finally figure out that we're called Muslims. Islam, original Islam, and we know Muhammad is not Jesus. Muhammad is just a messenger like Moses in Judaism. He's not God. He's not an incarnation of God. He's nothing like that. Nobody mentions that we actually believe in Jesus being a messenger, and not God, but a messenger from God. We believe in the virgin birth of Jesus, just like in the gospel. Nobody mentions that. A lot of these stereotypes are there, and I just encourage all of you who are curious about them. There's a very heavy book to read, but it's a very, I think, necessary book to read, which is Orientalism by Edward Said.
What's it called again?
Orientalism by Edward Said, S-A-I-D. Powerful book where he explains where these stereotypes in the West come from and how they were predominantly done by the industries that justified the occupation of other nations during the colonization era, basically. The East India Company, these companies would pay for these scholars to go to India and write these very derogatory things about brown people and mix Hindus with Muslims, and they're all just, inferior and dirty and this whole stuff. And it comes back and you see it a lot, and a lot of it still carrying over till today. There's a lot of things that are said about Muslims in this country that would not be said about other religions till today. Still, in terms of
30 seconds.
Are Muslims? Should Muslims be allowed to build a mosque? Huh? What? Like, would you even ask that for a Jewish temple? Would you even suggest that for a Jewish temple in New York? Why is it a Muslim mosque that can even ask, are Muslims patriots or not? Well, how could you ask that question? Why would you assume that? So there are all these barriers that we have to overcome as Muslims, being more and more recent immigrant community to the US.
Thank you. Heidi?
So I think one of the most common misconceptions about Jewish people are that a Jew is a Jew is a Jew. In other words, that most people are not aware of the different branches of Judaism, which of course everybody was Orthodox until about the late 1800s, when then, and what defines an Orthodox person is they believe in Torah law, which has 613 commandments that are called halachic law. And then there's rabbinic law, which is the Talmud, right? So that was definitely created by people. And then there is the oral tradition and the written tradition and midrash. And an Orthodox person is going to spend a lot of their life studying all of these and living their life in as best as they know in accordance with that. What happens in the 1800s is we move all the way to Reform. A lot of people are like, this is crazy. And it has nothing to do with modern life. So there's this whole movement that moves really toward kind of a social justice religion and away from a lot of things that had been considered traditionally Jewish. And at this time, we're coming back that way. We're becoming more conservative. Reformed Judaism had gotten rid of basically a lot of Hebrew. They had gotten rid of reading Torah, like Torah Shmora. Really, we're going to go out and do things. And then in the middle of that, there was a group of people who said, this is too far. You're no longer a religion over here. So that became the conservative religion, which was, we're going to take this, but we're also not going to be as strict. So they abide by Torah law, but not rabbinic law. And then there's a whole group that came later called Reconstructionists, which are actually a little more conservative than conservatives, but have the Reform ideals. So, and if you think about it, this is a religion that's probably, there's a guess, between 3,000 and 4,000 years old. So the idea that there wouldn't have been splits is pretty unreasonable. So I think that's one of the main misconceptions. Certainly the idea that Jews are rich. There are Jews with every type of income. And then aside from the Orthodox, and I don't even want to answer for them on this, but the idea of being chosen, I can tell you in the Reformed tradition, that is very uncomfortable for us. And for the most part in our prayer books has been totally taken out. We don't like that idea. There's not a way to, I think they tried to mitigate it and explain it. Now they said, let's just let it go. That the idea, well, Torah is a very old book, that the religion continues to grow and change through a medium called responsa, which the different branches have basically a judge panel, and you could send a question and say, well, what about this? Is this kosher? Is this right? And they will respond, and it takes the times into consideration. So all the rules and everything are always changing. It's always in flux.
Thank you. So I'm going to mix it up and ask some of the questions the students want to hear. So question number 1 here is, what is the difference between heart, soul, mind, body, and spirit in regard, using the lens of heart, soul, mind, body, and spirit? What is the difference between those?
Well, for me, most of those are intangibles except for body, and I don't personally believe in the soul or spirit. So for me, the heart is more like your emotions, like what you feel, like, hey, I love this person. I feel joy, I feel sad, things like that. Whereas the mind is more, well, why do I feel that? Like, oh, well, I feel that because they did this. Your mind's your logical side, your heart's your emotions, reason and emotions. Then your body is just the thing that makes it all possible. That, for me, is the distinction. Then for soul, spirit, that could be, there are some atheists I've met who do believe in that soul, spirit ideal. I'm not one of them, but they suggest more, that's like their essence, that's who they are. They don't really believe in a God or anything, but they think their spirit or soul is their essence of their personality that makes them react with their emotions, their reasoning, and how their body works.
Thank you.
I don't really know, actually. I'm not a professional at what the Bible says about this. But I'll give you my ideas, what I have gleaned from what I learned. Obviously, the body. You got the body. We know what the body is. Okay. So heart, soul, and spirit. I think there's a lot of blending. I'm not really an expert on language in the Bible, but there's a verse that says God wants us to, love the Lord your God with all your heart and all your soul and all your mind. And then in another place in the Bible, they add the spirit. And so there's this cumulative sense of love God with your whole being. And so it's, the heart is I think the Bible even says we talk about it as the seat of emotion, but then you got this, the spiritual aspect going on too. So I don't really know a ton about it, but there's definitely a sense that we have some complexity, that we're amazingly created people.
A very interesting question. So I guess on the mind and heart part, very similar to what Spencer said. The mind, it's very interesting because in Quran it sometimes addresses the mind and sometimes addresses the heart. It says it does Their hearts do not understand this, or their minds do not understand it. It doesn't always say their minds. The mind is more the reasoning, thinking, analyzing part of the human nature, and the heart is more the impulsive, emotional part. And both of them have very strong power over the human beings. So it's not that the mind controls the heart or vice versa. You've seen examples where this person loves that boyfriend or girlfriend, but she's really bad for him, or he's really bad for her, but she's still in love. That's the heart controlling the mind, right, or vice versa. You see people who do very cruel things because pragmatically it just makes sense for them, but their heart is not kicking in where empathy and compassion comes in. The soul, the body is the mortal shell, the physical shell that grows and shrinks and withers and dies and falls apart and so forth. So when someone cuts off your finger, that's a part of your body that's lost. It's not a part of your soul. So your soul is what makes you human. So your soul is the specific you. So if you get two identical twins, they have the same body, or on a very high level, physically they look almost the same, but they have very different souls. It's their character. It's who they really are inside. That's what makes this guy annoying and that guy funny, right? It's the same physical body, right? So what makes that person annoying is the choices they make in their life, the way they would choose to look at the world, the way that the world affected them, and then they basically decided to look back at the world, is what makes a soul. As Ahi was saying, in Arabic the word for that is nafs. Now, ruh is the spirit. For us, in the Quran, it's actually, some people asked the Prophet, what is it? And we were told that we won't be told the answer now. But our understanding is this basically the soul when it leaves the body, right now. So meaning that when you have a soul outside of this body, that will be a spirit. And that goes with God. We don't believe in ghosts. Our souls do not stay here in this world. They go up to God.
Thank you. Heidi?
I think there isn't a lot of discussion about any division. I think the soul-spirit combination would be the same thing, though one is nefesh and one is ruach. That I think maybe the spirit supports life, and then it's like breath. It's unseen, but it's essential to living, where the soul is a divine. We hear stories of it being a divine spark, which really comes more from Kabbalah, and which is kind of a mystical aspect of Judaism. And I think Judaism would say that the heart and mind should connect for right discernment, or for introspection, or the idea of self-evaluation and judgment of self. That those are the things that should come together in that. And I think I'd agree with Tarek very much in that it's that the heart can start that out of balance, that the heart or mind can become out of balance, and that when that happens, something not so good is going to happen in whatever way that happens. And that the body is pretty much life. It's what we know, it's where we are, it's what we can see, and it's life, it's what we live in, it's what we live as in many ways, is identifying our bodies. And I think, though, the other thing for the idea of soul is to see, there's a saying that's B'Tselem Elohim, meaning that everyone's created in the image of God. And so when you relate to other people, the people are the visible expression. That even if you don't believe in God, I tell a lot of my students this, you can believe in people. Like, don't worry about that. That'll take care of itself. But go ahead and love people, care for people. See the worth and value in people. And that's a really good place to start. So I think that kind of idea of soul and body is to really see people and to see what they need and to be willing to take care of that.
Cool. Thank you.